Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Shannon Show. So this is the first actual video where I'm talking about getting into crochet, talking about some of my crochet stuff here on YouTube. I have posted a couple of videos on TikTok, and I have made sort of regular posts over on Instagram about my crocheting and about some of my projects, but this is the first real, as I said, video I'm doing here on YouTube. There are a couple of playlists that I've created for like crochet journey and then crochet projects that are linked down below in the description if you want to go check those out. However, I thought it would be a good idea to have my first official video here on YouTube about crochet centered around tips and tricks that I've learned over the course of my first big project, which is this autumn crocheted blanket that I'm doing and I'm still currently working on. By the time this video is up, I am kind of hoping it'll be finished, but we'll see. So I have 10 tips that I have kind of learned along the way during my crochet project, specifically this autumn blanket right here. But before I get started, I do want to get this out of the way that I am very new to crocheting. This is my first big project that I've done. I've done a couple of little projects, and I am by no means an expert on this. So the first thing is to have a record of whatever yarn you're using for a specific project. And that can be in a note on your phone or pictures of the brand and the yarn color and type, etc. And those pictures are organized in folders on your phone. Or like I've been doing, I've been having a notebook on the projects I'm doing. And you can see here, these are the two types of yarn that I'm using for my autumn crochet blanket. Like for this one, the color specifically. Have a record of what type of yarn you're using for a specific project. The second tip kind of goes hand in hand with the first tip in having record, but have a place where you write down any project ideas you have, whether it's book sleeves or blankets or scarves or hats. Have some place where you write down all of your project ideas. So like on this page, I have project ideas and possible colors I would want to use for those ideas. And then I also have the second page where it's personalized projects, i.e. projects I want to do for specific people. So have a place where you can keep track of all of your project ideas or who you would want to make certain projects for. Third thing is have crochet acronyms handy. There are plenty of pictures that you can find online of crochet acronyms, abbreviations. You can also write them down in a little crochet notebook. I did that with mine, but have them handy just so you can reference back to it if you need to. You don't have to memorize it, but just have it for reference. But over time, you'll start to learn, like I am, certain crochet terms. Still have it handy just in case you need to refer back to it. The fourth tip is to practice certain stitches before you decide to implement them into a project. As an example, for my autumn crochet blanket back here, I am using half double stitches and double stitches to help give it an added length and to get to the length I want it really quickly. I'm using half double crochet stitches and double crochet stitches. But I practiced both of those stitches beforehand in other smaller projects so that I would have a handle on what to do during the project itself. And then tip number 5, which is kind of similar, is that when you're using 2 or more stitch types within a singular project, again, like how I'm using half double stitches and double stitches within my autumn crochet blanket, stick to that amount of stitches within the project and don't implement another stitch later on in the project. And use a specific pattern that's easy to remember. For example, I'm going to again use my autumn crochet blanket as an example. As I said, I'm doing half double stitches and double stitches, and my pattern for that in my mind is 2 rows of half double stitches, and then the third row is double stitch. So it'll be half double stitch, half double stitch, double stitch, and it just repeats in that pattern of every third one is the double stitch. And with my autumn crochet blanket, because that's the pattern I'm using of 2 rows of half double stitches and then a third row being the double stitch, I'm not going to throw in the half treble stitch or the treble stitch into the blanket because I'm way too far into the blanket to implement that and have it look right. It would just look out of place to suddenly start implementing the half treble stitch or the treble stitch. Tip number 6 is to try to use the same yarn for a singular project, and that can include the brand of the yarn, the feel, the size, although I do highly recommend just trying to use the same brand and size when you're working on a singular big project. For my autumn crochet blanket, I'm using 2 different brands, which I really like, and I personally do really like the contrasting feel between the 2 different types of yarn, between the 2 different brands, and they are the same yarn size. I believe they're both 4 or 5, but because the yarn is 2 different brands within my autumn crochet blanket, sometimes the edges look a little bit uneven even though I'm using the same amount of stitches within each row, because this yarn, this multicolored yarn, is a little bit thicker. Even though it's the same size, it's a little bit thicker than this solid orange one, so the edges look a little bit uneven. And again, tip 7 goes hand in hand with tip 6, is that if you are using 2 different brands within one project, like I'm doing with my autumn crochet blanket, plan to do some sort of border around the edges with one of the yarns around the edge of your project so that you can even off the edges and that it looks a little bit neater. And in that way too, you're not really looking at it thinking, oh, it looks really wonky because I used 2 different brand types. And then you can just have a nice evened out edge. Tip number 8 is that when you're getting a project online, be aware of where the seller or the pattern originates from, especially if you're in the US and buying a pattern from someone in the UK or vice versa. So just be aware of which country you're buying from and what their acronyms are and what their names are for certain stitches. The 9th tip is to set aside time where you crochet daily. Even if it's a minimal amount of time, like 5 minutes, you can still get quite a bit of crochet done within 5 minutes. It allows for a little bit more practice as well if you're newer like me. Set aside time to crochet daily. My definitive time for crocheting is before I go to bed, because it kind of just helps clear my mind a little bit and settle down before I go to bed. It can be first thing in the morning, it can be as you're watching TV or watching something on TV. It can be any time of the day, but set aside 5 minutes at least. The 10th and final tip is more project specific and based on my experience with my autumn crochet blanket, and that is if you're making a teen size or an adult sized blanket and you're not using bulky or jumbo yarn like the yarn I am using. This is not bulky, it's not jumbo. So if you're making a teen size blanket or an adult size blanket using not bulky or not jumbo yarn, the smallest stitch size I would recommend doing is the half double stitch, US terminology, the half double stitch, because that will help you gain a little bit more length with each row you do. And I would even recommend doing the double stitch to start off with, because if you have any other tips and tricks that you have learned over however long you've been crocheting, please leave them down below in the comments. I would love to hear them. I would love to start implementing new stuff, new tips and tricks for my own crocheting. So thank you all for watching and stay tuned for my next video.